Well, Pat already introduced you. Like he said, I'm here with Cathy Smith, the head of operation controls at Fidelity Digital Assets, and Matt Blumenfeld, the U.S. and global digital asset lead for PwC. I'm honored to be sitting up here with you two. You know, this has been an exciting year, I think, as it relates to institutional adoption of digital assets. I think, you know, like a lot of the talks have mentioned today, seems like we have some tailwinds behind us, you know, right now. So it's an exciting time. But, you know, we want to talk institutional adoption, internal controls. So, Cathy, I got to start with you. I think you are particularly well suited to talk about that. Can you kind of give us a base of how, you know, Fidelity, how you approach structuring internal controls in such an emerging, you know, field like that?
Yeah, well, when we started, is this okay? It's too loud? It's hard to get a sense of what it sounds like out there. When we started, you know, it's daunting. I think it's daunting to start anything in a mature industry and in a mature firm. So, you know, it was really important for us to be able to break it down to be something that was familiar to us, right? So I still say that 90% of what we do is traditional financial services processing. And, you know, we took our best practices from our broker-dealer businesses, our experience as custodians, and that afforded us the ability to really identify where the control points needed to be, and what those controls needed to be. So, again, back to that traditional and standard financial services processing concept, you know, we were asking ourselves, okay, how do we, you know, authorize users? How are we entitling them? How are we authenticating the transaction and making sure that transaction is good? So again, just breaking it down to the basics so that we could understand it. And that helped us operationally, obviously, but it also helped us culturally. We leverage the broader enterprise infrastructure at Fidelity. And so, you know, obviously a huge advantage for us to do that with regard to our security infrastructure, our screening infrastructure, our surveillance and monitoring. And so for us to be able to partner with, you know, the other parts of the broader organization, it helped tremendously to be able to describe the processing in a very traditional control framework kind of way. And so, you know, just helped us plug in much more efficiently. And then I would say finally, you know, for our customers don't understand necessarily the nuances of processing crypto. And we wanted it to look the same and feel the same for them as well. So again, trying to make it familiar for us so that we could drive that, you know, awareness and adoption across the firm and you know, across the industry. I appreciate
that. I appreciate that message of adapting, you know, the traditional aspect of kind of the things we all know into the digital asset space. You know, sometimes it can feel like digital assets are the Wild West and it's all new, but really, you know, there are some principles that we're all familiar with. It's really a matter of adapting those. But Matt, I want to ask you, you know, when you think about your clients and their needs, are there particular challenges with adopting digital assets, you know, for institutions? Are there particular systems or technology that have to be leveraged to kind of overcome that hurdle?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think it really depends on the business. Not every business is created equal. Not every business is at the same maturity level, as Cathy was talking about that. But she's absolutely right. You have fundamental things that large financial institutions, and again, I guess we can break this into several categories, but large financial institutions have a framework already in place, and you just have to think about the nuances for digital assets. For example, a lot of financial institutions today use batch processing to settle things, right? That doesn't necessarily work in digital assets, which is a 24/7, 365 days a year process. So you have to rethink it and reinvigorate it. Taking a new lens to it. You know, reconciliations as a whole, you're taking infrastructure that can be decades and decades old at some of these large financial institutions, which is a challenge in itself, not just for digital assets, but for modernizing their systems altogether. From a controls perspective, that can be extremely difficult, especially as you pick pieces of it out and you try to replace them. You can't replace everything at once. You have to do that in increments, and you have to be conscious about how you do that, because there are huge repercussions if you do it wrong. So again, taking legacy infrastructure and bringing the new modern technology to it, that can be a challenge. It has to be done in a thoughtful manner. And when you do that, right, again, recognizing these timing differences, reconciliations can be a challenge. So looking at things like ACH versus on-chain transactions, how do you reconcile that? I know it's been a discussion with many different types of large institutions, and so it's a problem we're trying to solve right now with Bitwave. I believe you'll see a demo of that at some point or not. But so yeah, I mean, it's a challenge out there. Again, each business is created differently, and you have to think about how can I leverage what's already there. No need to start from scratch. I think that's the biggest challenge that a lot of folks ignore.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay,
No, I was going to add to, for the unique part of crypto too, I think, we certainly had to design new controls and new infrastructure for our wallet, our key management practices, but, sticking with those control objectives and looking at those assertions that we always want to make, right? So timely, accurate, complete, putting those wrapper controls around it, right? Like review, supervision, oversight, so separation of duties, all of those concepts apply to the unique part of crypto too. And then our reconciliations, we love our reconciliations, but when we're considering the blockchain, we're like, how are we going to consider the blockchain? It's like the blockchain's the street, right? So just really making it, keeping those same standards of control design in mind for the non-standard processing as well.
Sorry, Joe, one more thing to add to it. Another challenge, and this is maybe less of a challenge today than it's been in the past, but digital assets, Web3, this whole topic at many firms has been one person, maybe two people, three people. So somebody said it before, I don't remember who, but you really need that champion to push this through. And what we've seen from the firms that have done this well, the ones that are further ahead, maybe like the folks sitting next to me, without saying names, they have brought everyone from the organization to the table to think about this collectively and holistically. You don't see that at every firm, especially, and I know we're talking institutions here, but especially on the digital asset native side of things, which I think is, again, when we work with those types of firms, we bring that rigor to it. I'll leave it at that. I have stories that I can say off stage.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. You're talking about, the challenges that you face in this space. Obviously, things are still emerging. I think everyone knows a big challenge that the space has been, the regulatory situation and staying in compliance and staying on top of that. Now, I mentioned at the beginning, it's been a real active year, right? Feels like maybe we have some tailwinds, but Cathy, I'm curious, for a traditional institution that's trying to be on the cutting edge of a new thing, how do you prepare for a regulatory environment that is, so dynamic? And I'm not, you don't have to give your exact opinion on where everything's landing. I think we all have our own opinions. But how do you approach that when things are changing so rapidly?
Yeah, I go back to, the processes that we've built and the controls, right? If you have good processes and you're holding yourself to those control standards and those assertions, you should be in a good place to respond to regulation. It's easier said than done, but that is the theory that we stand by, and that we do what we do, right? And we do that for our customers, and we do that for our associates. We do that for the firm. We do that, for the industry, and it's not without respect for the regulator, but the controls are the controls. And I think, that being said, we, like many of us, work in an industry that is highly regulated. So we come to the table with a compliance mindset, right? But I do think that if you're building good controls, you should be able to adapt and respond. Now, is there reporting that needs to, go into a format that's apposite for the regulator? Sure. But the underlying data and the underlying recons, that should all be there and available and ready to be, kind of articulated, right? And so when you know your control objectives, when you're interpreting that regulation, you can look and say, okay, they're looking for timeliness, right, in this space. They're looking for completeness. And you can then evidence by your existing processes how you're going to meet those requirements. So it becomes an exercise in articulation versus adaptation or build. So, again, that's how we look at it. And I think, it just makes sense to me in terms of an approach, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. So,
Because you don't know what's coming, right? We've never known what's coming.
So because you don't know what's coming, you're building that foundation, you're building that control environment, which keeps you nimble then to reply to, whatever the exact specific requirements are.
Invest the time in building good processes and controls, and we can spend a lot of time speculating, but you can actually get the work done with that objective in mind.
Yeah, makes sense. So Matt, I'm curious because we're in I'm kind of referring to what's been happening in the U.S. here, but I know you work with a lot of international clients, and crypto is obviously an international business. So how has, from your point of view, has the environment in the U.S. maybe differed from other jurisdictions internationally? And do you actually seeing it changing your client behavior depending on where they are?
Yeah, I'm not going to sit up here and lie and tell everyone that the U.S. is at the forefront of this. A lot of progress has been made this year. You've got a couple bills that are still out there at the further stages of our government. Some disappointing things have happened this year with SAB 121 getting all the way through both the House and the Senate and then getting overturned or vetoed, I guess is the technical term. I think things will change. I think, as you can see by the fact that you have two of the three candidates at the conference here speaking, the third was asked, I guess. But it's become a political issue. It's become an issue that matters to folks. And so that's pushing things forward here in the US. I know the question was about global. You're seeing things happening overseas in Europe. MiCA just went live recently. A lot of firms are already in compliance with that and or getting into compliance with that. I bring that up because it's a totally different approach than what you're seeing here in the US. It was seen as very collaborative, and industry participants were brought in to explain why some of the components of the regulation or the guidance were going to be difficult to actually implement. Same thing is happening in Singapore. Asia is doing things very differently than Europe, very differently than the US, but things happening in Singapore where you see the government actually creating these experimental sandboxes, a lot of experiments happening with the regulator and the government there, and the industry, right? The industry is there participating. So you're seeing a lot of that happen, and then Hong Kong also having had conversations with the legislators and regulators there. There's a lot happening there as well. And then obviously the Middle East, Dubai has seen tremendous. It's become the crypto hub of the world. Not that there aren't many hubs, but it's a very crypto friendly environment there. So you're seeing all this evolve around the world. Harmony is not the word I'd use for global regulation yet, but regulators are talking to each other and trying to put in place ways to comply with all the regulation at the same time. Just not there yet. One day I hope we get there, and I see us on that path today.
Matt, that makes sense. I'm curious, how would you describe, thinking about institutions specifically, I want more Fidelities of the world involved. How would you describe the sentiment that you're seeing, whether in your client base it's maybe considering, adopting a digital asset product, or even internally within your own firm? You mentioned, traditionally it's been one or two people leading the digital asset effort. Has that changed at all?
Yeah, there's no shortage of excitement. I think people are excited to finally be able to bring to life what they've been working on for years. It's been a lot of behind the scenes work, and now people are finally allowed to be public about some of this stuff. And that's even happening at the large financial institutions, or it's especially happening at the large financial institutions. When you look at the news that's happened just this past week, right, or just this past year, it's really hard to follow all the news because there's so much happening. Yesterday or the day before, a private credit fund was launched on Solana by a large financial institution. Ether ETFs finally went live after much discussion yesterday. Bitcoin ETFs earlier this year. Bitcoin was up 85%. I don't know the exact percent today, but like all of these things are happening. It's impossible to keep up with all the news that's now becoming public. This has been happening for years upon years. So there's a buildup, and even a large bank like Citi, and I can say this because of some of the things that this has become public, and we're allowed to talk about this now. We worked with them on a use case around payments, where they can facilitate cross-border payments internally at Citi for their clients and move money at a much faster, cheaper rate than previously done. When I say things take time, that took multiple months, over half a year to get that approved to move it forward. So there's a lot there that you'll see come to fruition over the next 9 months, and I think I'm excited. I know they're excited. I think just everyone is excited, right? There's retail investors are excited as well. But I'm not saying it's all going to happen overnight. But it's coming. So and it really will change the fabric of financial services.
Yeah. So Cathy, to that effect, where do you see education still needed in the space? Whether it's internally within an institution, is it with the end users, the customers? Is it with the regulatory bodies? Where do you still see a need for more education?
So internally, I would say, we've grown a lot at Fidelity Digital Assets. So, we obviously the associates that are executing the controls on a day-to-day basis know that, and they understand it. But we spend a lot of time with those associates. We take our procedures very, very seriously. We don't do anything unless it's written down. We invest a lot in our operational infrastructure. But, also around awareness of why the associates are doing what they're doing, right? And what the control objectives are. And that, empowers them to understand it, to, know how to react, but also to suggest ways to improve it, right? We're evolving quickly. And so that's really important internally. But as we've grown, we definitely recognize the need to spread that awareness in the teams that aren't in operations, right? So our sales teams, our marketing teams, our finance organization, just having that general understanding of controls. So we're going to spend a lot of time on that in the balance of this year. With regard to our customers, though, I think, it's a little bit different between segments. So on the retail side, certainly, I think there's a big opportunity to spread general understanding more broadly. I think, we're all subscribers and believers, but, there's still a lot of people who don't understand it. And we place such a high priority on education for our customers. It's a big area of focus for us and important to us. We want our customers to be educated, but I do think that there's still an opportunity to spread the understanding. And then again, on the retail side, I think when people don't understand something, they often react with fear, and so it becomes a bit of an emotional hurdle too. So we're hoping that with us in the space and our brand in the space, that we can allay some of that fear, and then further the education to again spread the adoption and drive the adoption. On the institutional side, it's a little bit different. Obviously, those customers are more advanced and have been in the space longer in many ways, and so they're asking tougher questions. And that being more advanced as an investor, but also reacting to the events in the industry, they want to know more about the controls, and not the obvious things. It's yes, they want to understand more about how we're securing private keys, but I've talked to customers about how I'm making sure that their account maintenance is accurate and performed, timely. So it's really just asking more about in more detail about the control environment, and that's really, really good. that's good business. You know, we want those I'm never unhappy about talking to a customer who wants to know more about controls.
Right, yeah.
So it's just those are the customers that care, right? And that's important. So yeah, I think it's a little bit different depending on the area.
For sure, a lot of moving parts there, and I think that's something we definitely see at Bitwave when we're working with an enterprise or an institution. We see, you know, it's typically a teamed approach, right? It's not just us and them. They're working with their auditor. Maybe they're getting, you know, technical guidance from someone. They're getting support in the internal control realm. Matt, I'm curious how you know, at PwC, what is the approach to work collaboratively with that type of client and to address all these things and managing the different teams involved?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it goes back to the point of having everyone at the table up front. I think that's super important. I can tell you, just going back to your education question for a second, I remember in 2020, 2021, I must have done 250 meetings across like C-suite, you know, senior management levels at various institutions, and it was always the same questions over and over. So, you know, you basically were on repeat. It was almost like you recorded yourself and you just went. It's very different today, right? People have leaned in and understand the topic, but there are still people at these large institutions that need to understand how this will generate revenue for them or how they will use this to grow or reduce operational costs. So a lot of what we do up front is talking about capabilities and foundational elements and things that any firm needs to have in place before they can start talking about the specific use cases. A lot of people focus on the use case first, but if you build out these foundational capabilities and functions and features, you're able to then expand your repertoire of what use cases you can approach. So we like to start there, and it always has to lead to ROI quickly. It's just the reality of the world we live in. So if you can't get to ROI for 5 to 10 years, you're just not gonna survive. Innovation at large financial institutions is very difficult. They're not agile like, and this is not all of them. This is just not a blanket statement, but it's you know, startups and fintechs are able to move much quicker. They may have more leeway here, but in large financial institutions, you have to find that ROI quickly. So it's about what's that initial component of this that will generate that revenue that you can then reinvest and expand out. But again, it all comes back to bringing everyone to the table and bringing risk management up front, internal audit, all of these functions that people sort of see on the outside and getting them involved so you build this in a compliant manner and have the controls in place so that when you do want to expand, it's a much simpler process.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, Cathy, have you seen that internally at Fidelity as far as, you know, aligning vision, finding service providers, finding an auditor that aligns with the digital asset vision of the company?
I think, yes, of course. I do go back to what I said about making it familiar and you know, kind of breaking it down so that people can understand it and not fear it, right? So, yeah, so we've definitely forged a lot of relationships with our internal business partners, but everyone at the firm is also excited about it, right? So it isn't hard to get people involved. In terms of, you know, our external audit firm, you know, we've been engaged with the same firm for a while, and you know, I think it's just really important to, and this goes for the internal business partners too. It's just so important to share that interest of doing the right thing, right? And I know that sounds cliche, but I really mean it. You know, I think that you know, it's not an easy relationship. And it shouldn't be. You know, hard yields good, and hard can yield great, and that's what we want, right? I remember very early on talking about, you know, just sort of not really knowing how to structure the bigger picture with our external auditor, and that was our baseline. You know, like, we're just going to be honest from the beginning, and we're going to be transparent, and just, you know, make the whole industry better in that way, right? Continue to raise the bar. That external assertion, that external opinion on our assertions is so tremendous for us. You know, our clients are so interested in getting that validation by another party. And so we spend a lot of time on it. So, we spend a lot of time with our external auditors. So it really does have to work. And again, I can't say enough about that shared integrity as being so critical. And then just, respect for each other. We all have a job to do, right? And together you can really make it work. But, tension yields good results, right? And it can be tense, but that's how it should be, right?
I would just add also, I think if you look at the firms that have been most successful in this space, they all have that person at the top that really believes in this, and it trickles down, right? If they inspire everyone, then it can trickle down and really help improve everything. And I think that's what you see at places like my panelist here, and some of the people that were on stage earlier, right? It starts at the top and really forces its way down.
Matt, I appreciate that. You're talking about kind of the intangible aspect of it. So I want to take our last few minutes here and talk maybe about that intangible side, the people side of things. Cathy, I'll start with you, but Matt, I want to know your opinion too. What do you look for? When you're thinking about building out your team internally, what are the skills, traits, knowledge? What is most important to you when you're building out a team internally in this space?
It's funny because I don't talk about this a lot externally. We talk about it a lot internally. So it was really nice to hear Gary lead with culture and lead with people this morning. That made so much sense to me. But I would say that we really look for that analytical, critical thinker, people who want to understand how things work, and want to make them go and want to make them better, right? And I think that mindset of, curiosity and just wanting to do something the right way, right? That's a mindset, and you certainly won't find everyone to be like that, but you need to seed the organization with that mindset. And I think that transcends prior experience, that transcends education, so I don't care if you just graduated from a top school with a degree in economics or if you just quit your band. That it's really, really important to have that, right? And those people develop gut feels, right? They do, they operate on a gut feel too. And that's what you want in your operations teams, right? If it breaks, they're gonna dig to find out, why it broke. I think it was last week I walked into the ops room and one of the team members was just, head in hands. I'm like, is everything okay? And the manager looks at me, he goes, he's chasing 6 cents. I'm like,
Been there.
And I looked at him, I go, I am so sorry, Dill. So, we really, really care about every single transaction, every single Satoshi, every single cent. It really, really matters to us, but you've got to seed the organization with people who it also matters to. And again, just, make that a priority to build your team with that mindset.
Yeah, Matt, what about you? Does that ring true for you?
Yeah, no, I would agree with everything she just said. But for me, it's simple. There's 2 things that I need in anyone who's on my team, and that's my more immediate team because I don't get to control everything. But it's, 1, you have to be in the space, experimenting, touching the digital asset, doing anything in this space, whether it's buying an NFT or being part of a community. You don't need to have $1 million portfolio, but you need to be experimenting and constantly learning. And second is, I have to be able to spend an hour at the airport with you when you inevitably get delayed because we travel too much. We spend hours in rooms trying to solve complex problems for folks. So you have to have that camaraderie with each other, and you have to be able to bounce ideas off each other, and you have to, like Cathy was saying, you have to be hungry to continue to learn and expand in the space. It moves way too quickly for you to be complacent.
No, I would echo that. We laugh a lot because we have to, and we again, it comes down to that respect for each other. But we definitely are able to have those respectful discussions. Sometimes, again, not easy ones, but then kind of laugh later on together, and definitely would add that requirement of being able to spend an hour in the airport together. It's you've got to. This is hard stuff. You've got to get along and make it go.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I think we're at time. I think
Thank
I
you for having
can
us.
speak for everyone when I say,
Thank
you know,
you.
having names like Fidelity, like PwC, moving the space forward is the exact type of thing we are excited about here at Bitwave. Thank you so much.
We are too.
Thank you.